Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 24 of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Got Tristen Ellison hopping on to talk some college football. We also hear from Jacob as we preview the World Series. We now know the matchups after last night. Jacob on the road, though, so there will not be a Mount Rushmore this week. Tristen, you are obviously in Antarctica with the snow blowing out there behind you, the bright white snow. It's been a few weeks since we've had you on. A lot has happened in the college football world.
Yeah, most definitely. There's been a lot of big games, a lot of big losses, and a lot of teams that are switching around as far as the college football playoff picture goes.
And one pair of goalposts that's now in a river in Tennessee. So
yes,
that was
one athletic director that seems to be perfectly okay with that.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be too upset with what it took for Tennessee to do that. But that's a great place to start. We're going to start with our new top six. Again, since it's been so long, a lot of things have changed. Some teams have gotten hot. Some teams have kind of cooled down, look beatable. So we're going to give our top six. Of course, the top four will go to the college football playoff. Then the next two are just on the outside looking in, a win or two away, and with a loss from one of those teams ahead of them from hopping into that spot. So I'll go ahead and start. My number one still Georgia. I still think that they are the team to beat. Even on weeks where they look bad, they're still extremely competitive, extremely tough to actually go out there and beat. You might be able to get close, but to actually pull it off there in the fourth quarter, this team is still just a notch above everyone else. Number two, I still got the Buckeyes of Ohio State. I think this offense is the best in the nation still. I really do believe that. I think they're going to be able to score on absolutely anybody. I don't see anyone in the Big Ten really slowing them down much. That includes Michigan. I'll talk about them here in a little bit. But Ohio State, this offense just way too talented. Number three, got Tennessee. The Vols going out and beating Alabama is massive. It completely changes the SEC when everyone thought it was just going to be Georgia and Alabama rolling their way to that title game. Now all of a sudden Tennessee's in there. They've got a chance to go and run and potentially make that college football playoff, because now if them and Alabama both sit together at one loss, guess what? Tennessee beat Alabama. So I don't know how you put in Alabama ahead of Tennessee. That loss by Bama might just knock them out of the college football playoff. Number four, I still have Clemson. I don't know exactly how much I'm buying into Clemson. They've had some tight wins as of lately, especially last week beating Syracuse due to some controversy there at the end. But Clemson, they're undefeated. The offense seems to be getting better and better every week. I wouldn't bet on them to win a game in the college football playoff. They've still got some tricky games left. I'm not so sure they get there. We're going to have to really see if they can play their best football here in the coming weeks. The team's just on the outside looking in. I've got number 5, Michigan. Again, this defense is carrying them. The offense is a little bit better than it was last season. They haven't really played too many tough teams, though. They've kind of just feasted on a soft schedule. They will, of course, still have to play Ohio State as this season goes on. So the Wolverines will have their chance to crawl inside the top 4. And number 6, I've got Alabama. There are 2 weeks that they've really raised some question marks. Of course, that win over Texas and then that loss to Tennessee. Bama has some issues for sure. Bryce Young, of course, how healthy is that shoulder? We don't really know yet. He looked pretty good this last week against Mississippi State. When he's there, Alabama is going to be right there in the conversation, but that loss to Tennessee hurt them bad. So what are your top 6 here, Tristen?
My top 3 look roughly the same. I've got Georgia at number 1. They had 2 close games this year against Missouri and Kent State, and it's a toss-up about how close they really were. They're still 7-0. Their defense, I think, is what's really holding them down, because Stetson Bennett, how he has improved from last year, he's still not that game-changing quarterback, but their defense is still unreal. They've allowed 9 points per game, and I think about 80 rushing yards and 150 passing yards. If you just can't compete with a team that doesn't allow you to move the ball like that. At number 2, I've got Tennessee, who Georgia actually plays in 2 weeks, and the winner of that game most likely is going to end up being the SEC East, in the championship game for the SEC conference. Obviously, the big win versus Bama. They had another big win against LSU, who's ranked and actually about to play Bama. Um, their only close games really were Pitt and Florida, where they allowed 150 rushing yards and 3 sacks in both games. And I think that would be their only weak spot, would be that, and their red zone defense is also very, I don't want to say poor, but not exactly where it should be for
A little problematic.
problematic. And then at 3, I've got Ohio State. Ohio State's offense has been able to do things that I don't want to say is unseen, because there's that 2019 LSU team that was very good, but I think Ohio State's offense this year is just very well. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., Amika Egbuka, who
Mecca
both
Egbuka. Yeah.
oh Mecca Egbuka, both looking very good. CJ Stroud looking also very good. He should be in probably the Heisman conversation. And they're averaging 50 points a game. And you do that in college football, and you're probably going to be very successful. And then my top 3 is what I'm really sold on. My next 3, I feel, are very interchangeable, as far as depends on how you catch them. Could be a bad game, could be a good game. Who knows? Number 4, I've got Michigan, scoring 42 points a game, only allowing 12. But then there's that question about, they had that starting quarterback controversy, that whole situation going on early in the season. I don't know if that's completely settled, because I think it's very hard to lay down those rumors, or whatever you want to call them, as far as
fire.
Yeah, put out that fire once you already have that quarterback competition going on, unless it's like a solid. And I just haven't seen it be that solid of a
Yeah.
he's going to be the starting quarterback. And then 5, I've got Bama. Bama, like you said, recently they just have not looked like the Bama of old. They haven't looked as completely dominant. I don't know if that's because they're getting worse or other teams are getting better. But at the end of the day, it's still Nick Saban. You still got Bryce Young, Will Anderson, all these stud dudes that should be very good, depending on how much effort they give, or whatever the reasoning is for them being not as successful as usual. And then my number 6 is Oregon. I know you were laughing at me a little bit, but I truly think that um, we got one loss, and obviously it was a really bad loss to Georgia, but a week 1 Oregon team, and week 8, 7 or 8, whatever week it is now, um, this Oregon team is night and day difference from what week 1 Oregon looked like. And I think it's been really cool to watch, as far as the transformation of all these players, whether it's Bo Nix, who I think should be in the Heisman conversation, honestly. And then you got Bucky Irving, you got all these studs out at wide receiver, Ferguson at tight end, like our O-line only allowing 1 sack the entire year. And it was kind of an iffy, he was diving forward, whatever. But I just think that would be my top 6. And like I said, last 3 kind of iffy. First 3, I feel pretty solid on.
And then, of course, there were some teams like I would have had Oregon on my honorable mentions if we did that. Also, can't sleep on TCU right now. They're still undefeated in the Big 12. They still got a lot of tough games left on the schedule, but you can't overlook that undefeated record. For Oregon, we're going to kind of transition from our top 6 into a conversation. We're just going to talk about the Pac-12. On Oregon, I mean, I know a lot of people are going to be looking at this and saying, oh, this guy's just an Oregon fan. He's a homer. But, I mean, it's hard to disagree. So, yeah, that week 1 loss to Georgia was horrendous. Just absolutely a joke by Oregon in that game. Since then, they've dominated everyone, with the exception of Wazoo, where they needed that late comeback to beat the Cougs in Pullman. But I mean, everything has just been utter dominance. 70-14 over Eastern Washington, 41-20 over BYU, the 3-point win over the Cougs, 45-27 over Stanford, 49-22 over Arizona, and 45-30 over UCLA. The score really was much closer than that game was. Oregon, they're right there. They're in the driver's seat for the Pac-12 without a shadow of a doubt. They still have a couple of tricky games on their schedule. That rivalry game with UW is always going to be one that people have their eyes on, but Oregon gets to play that in Eugene. They also have another home game in Eugene with Utah before finishing up the season at Oregon State. And I think that Beaver squad is pretty talented, although I think Oregon takes care of business. I don't see anyone else tripping them up. I think the question becomes, who do they play in the Pac-12 championship game? You got USC, UCLA, and Utah, all with one loss. One of those teams I have a little bit below the others while I still am leaving them in contention. The top four, I think, without a shadow of a doubt, are Oregon. Then I'm going to have USC 2, Utah 3, and UCLA 4. The reason I'm still giving the Bruins a shot, I know you disagree after the egg that they just laid against Oregon. The schedule is so soft down the stretch. Stanford, Arizona State, Arizona. They do have that game with USC, but then Cal. I mean, they only have one game left on their schedule against a team with a winning record right now. So I don't think you can overlook the Bruins. That offense is going to at least put up points. It's going to be, can this defense slow down anyone, and can they beat USC?
Yeah, I agree. I think Oregon is the clear favorite at number one, mainly because of who they've beaten and how they've beaten them. I think Washington, like you said, Washington State was by far our toughest game we've had. And that is why the record might not necessarily show it, but I would place Washington State above UCLA at this point, because watching that game, I did not think their quarterback was that good. They came into the game talking about how he's going to be a Heisman candidate and all this stuff, and we had 3 dropped interceptions in the first half that were like, just what are you thinking type of throws. And then the only thing I'll give them is their running back, Charbonnet. He is a stud. He is legit good against the top run defense in the Pac-12. He was slicing and dicing. He looked just incredible. And then I'd go USC, Utah after Oregon, and I think it's just because USC has Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, who've got that connection from Oklahoma. I think Travis Dye from Oregon. He was a stud last year. I think he's going to be, like he has been, a stud this year, And then Utah is Cam Rising. It's just, they're looking very solid as well. If I had to make a number 4, I think you made a very solid point with UCLA only having 1 loss, and their remaining schedule is absolutely nobody. I would put, as far as making a Pac-12 title game, those are the 4 teams that can do it realistically. If I had to make best teams, though, I would definitely put Washington and Washington State up there. I think what Michael Penix is doing, playing quarterback out of Washington, I think he's doing really well. I think he leads the nation in passing yards, I believe. And he's looking very solid. And like I said before, Washington State is a team that I believe gave us our toughest opponent, minus obviously Georgia. But I think it's just this team's different than when we played Georgia, and for them to push us as hard as they did, I think goes to say for Washington State, even though they have performed not as well recently.
And I will also point out that fact, the week 1 games are always weird because you have an entire off season to prepare rather than just, week 2. All right, we got a week to get ready for this game. So Georgia definitely came in plenty prepared for that game against Oregon. But let's talk the next tier of teams that you had. UCLA clumped in. I still had them a little bit above, but I think the next 3 are pretty clearly Oregon State, Washington, and Wazoo in any particular order. I personally have it Oregon State, Wazoo, and Washington. Oregon State, this team just feels like, once again, they're lying under the radar. They got so many different guys who can beat you. They use 3 different backs that just all have a ton of talent. They've used a couple different quarterbacks due to injuries and whatnot, but they're very solid. The defense is much improved from where they have been. They have actually allowed the fewest points in the Pac-12 league play so far this season, despite playing in the 5 games. So that defense is much better. I still put Wazoo over Washington. I don't feel super confident about that. The Cougs have laid back-to-back eggs, and maybe that's why I don't feel confident. They looked horrendous in the second half against USC, and then just I don't even know what was going on against Oregon State. They look like a joke in that ball game. Washington, they're just letting these teams hang around. I've heard so much about this Washington offense. I didn't watch them until week 3 against Michigan State, where they looked good again. Didn't watch them against Stanford. Didn't watch them against UCLA because I had other priorities going on in my life. Then they came out. The offense still looked good against Arizona State. Couldn't stop them. Ended up losing that game. Offense looked good against Arizona. Couldn't stop them, but they pulled it out late in a shootout. And then the offense kind of disappeared against Cal this week. The Golden Bears slowed down Washington pretty well, and they were able to score. So I'm very concerned about this Washington defense because on one hand, I talked about Oregon State. They've allowed the fewest points. Washington's tied for the second most points allowed with Arizona, only ahead of Stanford, and that's only by 1 point. So there's really no gap there. So the defense of UW concerns me. Wazoo, it really comes down to Cam Ward just can't turn the ball over. They also have had a lot of injury issues pop up, which is very concerning. Could be exactly why they're struggling to move the football right now. But I think those 3 teams are for sure that bowl eligible, will get to a bowl game, and can at least go out and win a bowl game for the Pac-12.
Yeah, I would agree. Oregon State is a team that recently has been looking very, I don't want to say great, but they've been looking very decent. Not a top of the Pac-12, but just barely under, and add a few more, whether it's more experience or another big recruit, who knows, in there, and they could be a very good team. But I would go Washington State and then Washington, just because, like I said before, what Washington State was able to do to Oregon's defense, which their defense hasn't looked 100% solid at times, but I think what they were able to do just shows that they are a team that's capable of hanging around with some very good teams. And Cam Ward is a stud. And with Washington, like I said before, again, like Michael Penix Jr. is another guy that he's a dude, like he could be a very solid team once you put a few more pieces around him, because not everybody can be a game changer quarterback that just can just throw it to anybody and it doesn't matter who it is and they're going to be good,
Yeah. I'm happy for Michael Penix Jr. The season he had with Indiana last year was just a nightmare. So I'm glad he was able to kind of put that in rearview mirror and come back and look solid this year. But yeah, those 3 teams I think are clearly ahead of the bottom 5, which we're going to speed run through. I think there's obviously Cal, Arizona, and Stanford are a step above Arizona State and Colorado. I think Cal, the offense just can't seem to get the job done. They really struggle offensively. For Arizona, they're going to score points. They just can't stop anybody so far this season, and that schedule is brutal. Their next 3 weeks, they have USC, Utah, UCLA, and then they play Wazoo before ending the season against Arizona State. So that is a tough stretch for the Wildcats. In Stanford, I mean, for how much we were throwing at them about not looking good early in the season, they started off really struggling. We're 0-5, but 3 of those losses, they were 1-4, but 3 of those losses were to teams that were ranked. USC, Washington, and Oregon. Lost to Oregon State by just a point, then beat Notre Dame and beat Arizona State by a combined 3 points. So, I mean, Stanford's still some work to do. I don't think they quite get to a bowl game, but then you got Arizona State, which is just an absolute mess right now. But if you think they're a mess, wait until you see Colorado, because that team is just abysmal right now. It's shocking that they went from just a handful of years being Pac-12 championship contenders, being in the Pac-12 championship game, to now, gross.
Yeah, I would agree. Cal, Arizona, Stanford are the next 3 after that are just close to getting to a bowl game, but not quite. And then exactly the same. Arizona State is better than Colorado, but I wouldn't go by the hugest of margins, And Colorado is just bad. very bad. They can't. I don't know what it is about. I mean, they're obviously Division One football players, so they're good, but they just compared to the rest of anybody, really, I don't think they could beat any FBS team as well as some FCS teams. There's some very good. I'd say most of the FCS could probably beat Colorado at this point.
Yeah, Colorado's terrible. And I'm glad that we ended with Colorado because we're going to move on. We ranked our bottom 4 teams in the FBS. These are teams that nobody wants to be. Colorado is on the list. I didn't put mine in any particular order, but we just kind of talked about Colorado. They at least got that overtime win over Cal. Good for them. They got a win under their belt. The momentum didn't last. They got absolutely dog walked by Oregon State in their next game. I know you also have Colorado on yours. They're bad. You kind of just pretty much talked about it. They're bad.
Yeah, for sure. I've got Colorado. My next one I'm going with is Akron, and I'm a little salty towards Akron because they are the ones that took our old OC from last year. At the same time, I'm very thankful that they took Joe Moorhead because the offense we had last year was very clearly not good. A whole lot of running and checkdowns and whatever it is, and meanwhile we got Kenny Dillingham now, so that's my guy, Dilly. And yeah, Akron, and then I've got Hawaii, who for quite a few years now has just been abysmal, which is kind of weird you think about it, because obviously USC, UCLA, they got the hype of living in LA and all this, but you'd think people, especially 18, 19, 20-year-old guys, would want to go live in Hawaii. It just hasn't seemed to work out for them. And my last one is Colorado State with Jay Norvell, new head coach and a system that has just not seemed to work out for him.
Yeah, so I obviously have Colorado on mine. I also have Akron. They've been abysmal, especially on the road. They've been outscored by 139 points on the road this season. That is just, what are you even doing? I also have Colorado State as my number 3 on the list. I watched them play Wazoo, and they look just terrible. I was hoping it was Wazoo was just that good. Wazoo's good, but Colorado State is atrocious. Jay Norvell has a lot of work to do to try and get that team back to any semblance of competitive. And I said no particular order except for this one. UMass is one of the worst football teams I have ever seen in my life. This team is a joke. I don't even know how they're an FBS team. They're an independent, and I know why, because nobody wants to let them in that conference because, wow, this team stinks. They're just awful. They're Minutemen, and about a minute into the game, the game's already over. So UMass, that's just
there's a little pent-up aggression there.
Yeah. What are you doing? Like, how do you not luck into at least being decent a couple of times? No, they've been absolute dog water all season. I never want to mention UMass on this podcast again. We've got beef. They're officially on the list. I'm going to start keeping a list of players and teams behind me that.
Yeah, we've got UMass. We've got Akron. Might as well throw
UMass
Miami.
And Akron.
Throw Miami up there as well.
Let's wait a little bit longer on Miami before we really burn them at the stake. Yeah, okay. UMass and Akron, you're going to see them up there next week. But that'll do it for our college football talk. Thank you so much, Tristen, for hopping on. Once again, we will have Jacob jumping on after the break to preview our World Series. The American League and National League Championship Series are in the rearview mirror. It's time to talk about Phillies Astros World Series that's coming up next year on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
Alderson's Awards West Printwares is your one stop to tell the world about your school, club, or business. Spread the word on jackets, shirts, hats, and more from Awards West Printwares in Centralia. Awards West Printwares offers fast service of quality products including screen printing and embroidery done on site. They offer a wide variety of advertising specialties at great prices and delivered right to your door. For a full catalog, go online to aldersons.net. For maximum impact, Alderson's Awards West Printwares is ready to serve you today.
Cheap insurance is nice, but none of that matters if your insurance company isn't there when you need them most. When you are looking for a trusted insurance company, well, it's our name, Clear Choice Insurance. We represent multiple companies to get you the best possible price and coverage for home, car, and business plans. The Clear Choice Pros will craft the perfect plan to fit your needs and budget. Check us out at clearchoiceinsurance.us. Make the clear choice with Clear Choice Insurance.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. No, that is not Jacob on the screen. He's on a work trip this week. So Shawn hopping on to talk some Major League Baseball. We had to talk about the postseason, the ALCS and NLCS now officially in the books. We're going to start with, I guess we'll start with the ALCS. Not that either of them were really exciting. The Houston Astros take care of business against the New York Yankees, an easy sweep. This is starting to feel like Houston owns the New York Yankees. It's the one time I've ever rooted for the Yankees ever in my life. It was right here. They couldn't get the job done. Aaron Judge was getting booed, which is very interesting for Yankees fans that want to keep him in the Bronx. But I mean, this was more about Houston. They're just deeper than the Yankees.
Yeah, I just don't understand this Houston team. How are they still good? We got players that used to be in their prime. Now they're a little bit regressed, but now all of a sudden we're in the playoffs and here they are again. So they win 105 games this year. So they know how to win baseball games and they do it very well. So in the ALCS, you look back at the series report and it looked like New York never stood a chance to begin with. So they're just the Astros doing Astros things. So.
And this is with Jose Altuve really struggling throughout the playoffs, and they're still getting the job done. He did not get a hit in the 3 games against the Mariners. Yes, I have to throw that in there because I don't like Jose Altuve. But Yordan Alvarez is becoming just an absolute megastar in the postseason. Jeremy Pena is just a stud. He's replaced Carlos Correa. Not only replaced him, he's kind of elevated that position. Exactly. He looks just amazing. Alex Bregman has started figuring things out. They have, I swear, 8 or 9 starting pitchers that could be aces on any other team. It's ridiculous what Houston has. For the Yankees, again, the talk now goes to, can they keep Aaron Judge? Is it time to kind of blow this thing up a little bit if Judge goes elsewhere? Because that's kind of the centerpiece of your team. Do they keep Rizzo around? The Yankees might look very, very different come next season because I don't think Judge is going to stay in New York after the way they treated him in this series.
Yeah, I know I want it. And, for me, I'd never want to play there anyway, but I wonder, guys that have been there the whole career, they hit free agency and they're just like, where could I go that I could grow a beard? Anywhere but here. So, I wonder if that ever plays into it. For me, it would, but, there's going to be a lot of things. He's obviously going to get paid. It's going to come down to where does Aaron Judge want to play?
And if Aaron Judge is watching this or listening to this, please don't grow a beard. That would look just weird. Don't do it. So the Astros headed to the World Series. Let's now head to the NLCS, where you were a little bit happier with how it played out. The Padres kind of just getting beat up by the Philadelphia Phillies. Coming into this season, we talked about the Phillies' biggest issue was the defense. They loaded up on this offensive talent, like Kyle Schwarbers, Nick Castellanos. These guys who go out there and hit, but might not be the best defenders. Well, they're hitting enough to overcome that because Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola have just been studs at the top of that rotation. This Phillies team caught fire at the right time, and they feel just like the Braves from last year. I know I've said that about a couple different teams, but they're playing like the Braves, and that atmosphere in Philadelphia is something else.
Yeah, I feel like on the back of their dugout wall, they should just have it painted, get it back, because they're going to give up the runs. All they got to do is go hit the ball, and those guys can hit the ball a long way. So all they got to, give up a couple runs, make an error, get it back. So, which they've proven. I was very happy with the outcome of the series. Being a Dodgers fan the last couple of years, I just can't stand the Padres personally. So it's good to see them get their butt whooped like that. I was going to be worried if it came down to Houston and the Padres in the World Series. Where do I go? I don't even want to watch that game. So, I'm happy the Phillies made it. Bryce Harper had a huge NLCS there. So, let's hope they continue to roll it through.
Yeah, that's like a Colts Packers Super Bowl for you. I feel like it's just no winning for you at all. But Bryce Harper, I mean, that he's having his big moment. He's having those moments that you heard about Bryce Harper, envisioned him having when he was coming up, when you heard about this high school kid who was hitting 500-foot bombs. He's here, and now he's getting to do it on the grandest stage. He's going to get to play in the World Series, his first World Series, because he wasn't with the Nationals when they finally went. This Phillies team is definitely going to be the underdog. Let's just transition into the World Series. Don't have too much to say about the Padres that we haven't already talked about throughout the season. Houston and Philly. Houston's going to score runs. You just talked about it. Phillies, they're going to give up their runs. It's all about getting them back. Can they get them back, though, against this rotation? You know, again, I talked about whether it's Justin Verlander, you got Framber Valdez, you got Lance McCullers Jr. It's just everyone in this rotation for Houston can go out there and throw 7 shutout innings and make batters just look absolutely lost up there. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia, they've got 2 really good pitchers who might be able to go toe-to-toe with some of these Astros pitchers, but can they find a way to score runs? Can their bullpen do enough to keep them in games? I just don't feel confident in the Phillies. I think that Houston kind of bullies their way in 5 games to win this World Series. I hope I'm wrong, but the Astros just look so dang good right now.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, unfortunately, what they did to the Mariners, you know, that 18-inning game where they gave up absolutely nothing. You know, they had Luis Garcia coming out in, the 13th inning of that game, a day that he's not supposed to pitch, and now he's throwing 5 shutout innings where he really didn't give up anything at all. I just hate seeing them succeed like that, but they are so good. Alex Bregman, you know, throughout the year, I found myself questioning, like, what happened to this guy? Like, you know, 3 years ago, we're talking about this guy being a future MVP of the league, and not that he's had terrible seasons, but he hasn't been Alex Bregman. And now we get to the postseason, it's like, oh, there he is, you know. And, you know, we thought maybe they'd miss Carlos Correa, but like you said earlier, Jeremy Pena has been the spark of this offense all postseason, and their pitching is so good. But the Phillies can hit. They can hit. They hit the long ball. You know, I think it's going to be a little bit more back and forth. You know, I'm gonna take the Phillies just because I don't like the Astros so much. It's more of a wish here than a belief. But I'm gonna say Phillies in 6. Will it come true? I'm not sold either way on this one. You know,
Houston. I mean, they're yet to lose a playoff game. As soon as Yordan Alvarez, talking about this just crushes me. Hit that walk-off home run in game 1 against Seattle. Right then and there, it's like, oh, this team is just – how do you get 27 outs against them? Good luck figuring it out. The lineup is so deep. Jeremy Pena going to, again, likely get a World Series ring, in my opinion. Going to finish second in Rookie of the Year voting, though, so at least the Mariners have that over Houston. But that'll do it for our World Series preview. Again, the Astros and the Phillies, Game 1 starting on Friday. We'll see if the Phillies can get off to a good start. Aaron Nola against Justin Verlander. Verlander bounced back from getting just absolutely hammered against the Mariners, and his first start of the postseason threw pretty well against the Yankees. Aaron Nola has been pretty solid all throughout the postseason. So Game 1 in Houston tomorrow night. That is going to do it, though, for this edition of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Once again, we thank you so much for hanging out with us. And next week, we'll have Jacob back, so we will be back to doing our Mount Rushmore series. We will also talk about the first couple games of this World Series and some big trade moves going around the NFL. That is all coming up next week here on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.